You ever see one of those political videos that doesn't feel like a polished ad at all? It feels more like a raw dispatch from the field? Well, today, that's what we're digging into. We're dissecting a viral field report from Canadian politician Charlie Angus. We're going to break down, piece by piece, how this very specific style of populist message actually works, how it builds that feeling of authenticity, taps into real anxiety, and then offers a very particular kind of hope. So let's get into it. Right off the bat, the message is grounded in a specific, kind of greedy reality. This isn't some sterile office or a fancy TV studio. And choosing a punk rock mural, that's no accident. It's meant to tap into this long history of anti-establishment art and music. It's a really powerful visual cue that's basically saying, hey, I'm one of you, I'm not one of them. And here's the next layer of building that credibility, the whole boots on the ground narrative. By talking about the physical struggle of the journey, battling a snowmageddon, the speaker isn't just in Alberta, he earned his way there. This builds the sense of shared struggle, and it reinforces that this isn't some report from an ivory tower. No, this is a hard-won perspective, right from the front lines.
Okay, so here's our game plan for breaking this all down. First, we'll look at how the scene is set. Then, we dive into how it uses voter anxiety, and the quick pivot to a message of hope. After that, we hit the core strategic lesson, this idea of transactional versus relational politics. We'll see how that lesson gets turned into a concrete plan, and then finally, we're going to ask the big question. Is this a really savvy strategy, or is it all just a smokescreen?
So the first move in this playbook is to tap into a really powerful emotion, fear. The strategy here isn't about creating anxiety out of thin air. It's about finding the anxieties that are already there, and then validating them, making the audience feel totally seen and understood. And that creates an immediate, high-stakes emotional connection.
Now, what's really fascinating is how the message gets delivered. See, instead of the politician saying this himself, he reads a comment from a viewer. This creates this incredible feedback loop. He's not just speaking to his audience anymore. He's speaking for them, using their own raw, unfiltered words to voice this deep fear about political decay.
And then the stakes get raised. A second viewer comment just escalates that anxiety from something happening at home to a full-blown international conflict. The language here is so stark. Economic war as a precursor to true war. Suddenly, political disagreements aren't just policy debates anymore. They're framed as these existential threats to the whole country.
And right here, this is where the emotional hook is set. This third comment taps into this really profound sense of betrayal. By bringing up shared sacrifice in past wars, the message validates this feeling that a trusted friend has suddenly become an enemy. So, in just a few minutes, the audience's deepest fears about politics, about war, about betrayal have all been brought to the surface and legitimized.
Okay, so once you've stirred up the problem and validated all that deep anxiety, the narrative does this incredibly sharp pivot. It moves immediately from this feeling of overwhelming crisis to a story of hope, of action, of empowerment. Let's take a look at how that's done.
And here they are, the heroes of the story are introduced, young activists. They're framed as being on the front line of democracy. But the scale of their action is intentionally small and tangible, one door at a time. That is such a powerful contrast to those huge, abstract fears of war and fascism we just heard about. It completely shifts the tone from passive fear to active engagement. It tells the viewer, hey, the solution isn't in some far-off Capitol building. It's right here, in our own communities.
And right here, this is it. This is the core insight, the central thesis of the entire message. And it's delivered as this lesson he learned from these young activists. The solution to the crisis of fear isn't some better policy or a bigger idea. Nope, it's something way more fundamental. It's about building a relationship of trust. And that perfectly sets the stage for the big strategic lesson that's about to come.
Okay, this brings us to the real intellectual heart of the whole message. The video uses this on-the-ground experience to basically diagnose a massive political failure. It argues that in an age where nobody trusts institutions anymore, one political model is just breaking down, while another one is rising up to take its place.
So first you've got the old way, which the video calls transactional politics. In this model, politics is basically a marketplace. Parties offer up a bunch of policies, and voters buy the one they like the best. The relationship is purely contractual. It's short-term, it's impersonal, it's all about the exchange of goods.
But the alternative being proposed is relational politics, and this model argues that politics isn't a marketplace at all, it's a community. It's not about those short-term exchanges, it's about building long-term trust and a sense of being in a shared struggle together. In this world, voters aren't just consumers, they're active participants in a cause.
And right here, you can see the differences laid out side by side. It's pretty stark. Transactional politics is top-down. It offers you big, bold ideas from on high. Relational politics, on the other hand, is bottom-up, it's grassroots, and it offers a much simpler message. We've got your back. For the transactional model, rights are just these legalistic things that can be traded. For the relational model, they're foundational to our human dignity. This is the core diagnosis. One side is trying to sell products, while the other side should be building a movement.
So, great theory, right? But how do you actually put it into practice? Well, the message now shifts gears from just defining relational politics to outlining a concrete strategy. And it's based on a really human need, the need to belong.
The message draws this really sharp contrast. The argument goes like this. One side of the political spectrum always feels like it needs to invent bigger, bolder ideas. That's the transactional approach. Meanwhile, the other side is winning by offering community, things like outings and gatherings that create a real sense of belonging. The takeaway is pretty clear. People are way more hungry for community than they are for another policy paper.
So the core of the strategy is this. The first step is not a 10-point plan. It's a simple, incredibly powerful message of solidarity, and it's aimed directly at people who feel like they've been left off the political map. It's all about shifting the focus from abstract policy to a personal promise of support. This, the argument goes, is how you actually begin to build that relationship of trust.
All right, now that we've analyzed the message itself, we have to turn a critical eye to the messenger. I mean, is this a genuine strategic insight from a principled leader, or is there maybe another story to tell? Let's bring in some of the critics.
A powerful message really requires a credible messenger, right? So we have to ask the question, does Charlie Angus, the politician delivering this populist critique, actually have the credibility to make this case? Or is this man of the people persona a really carefully constructed act?
And here's the first major criticism. You've got journalist Mark Burry, who suggests this entire persona, the crusader, the protector of the little guy, is basically a form of self-delusion. This critique argues that the populist image is just that, an image. It's a fabrication that maybe doesn't line up with the reality of his political career. Then there's another critical take, this one from Fair Press, and it offers a much more cynical explanation. It claims that Angus's political pivot and his retirement aren't part of some grand renewal based on relational politics. No. Instead, it's all just a smokescreen to avoid getting crushed in the next election. This totally reframes the entire narrative as a convenient excuse, not some principled stand.
And that really leaves us with the central question here. We've seen how this Alberta Report uses authenticity, fear, and hope to build a really powerful message. We've explored its compelling diagnosis of our political moment, this shift from transactional to relational politics. But is this a genuine blueprint for actually rebuilding trust in democracy, or is it just a convenient narrative, a really compelling story told by a politician who might be looking for a graceful exit? I guess that's the question this whole report ultimately leaves us with.